Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Writers Festival's Toolkits Showcase. My name is Melody Paloma, and I'm a poet and critic, and I work for Australian Poetry in their Young Poets programs. So I'm joined tonight by Georgia Kartas, Ellen O'Brien, and Sarah Uma. Just before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm broadcasting from. So that's the Jirinyanj people of the Yuin country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, as well as the elders of the lands that this broadcast reaches. I'd also ask that everybody tuning in acknowledges the country that you're tuning in from. This always has been and always will be Aboriginal land. So tonight we're joined by the lovely three ex-participants of Toolkits. So we have Ellen O'Brien, Sarah Uma and Georgia Kartas. So Toolkits Poetry is an Australian poetry and express media partnership. Sarah was a participant in the inaugural program in 2016 and Ellen and Georgia participated in this year's program. And I've had the pleasure of facilitating the program in both 2016 and 2017. So just a little bit about Toolkits. Toolkits is a series of 12-week intensive craft-specific writing programs connecting and developing the work of young writers from across Australia. So the poetry program focuses on forms, functions, histories, and uses of poetry, combining theoretical approaches, practical exercises, and one-on-one mentoring. So you can read more about the program on both Express Media and Australian Poetry websites. You can also tune into Toolkits Live episodes from last year and also this year. So they include broadcasts from guest artists Omar Musa, Benjamin Laird and Evelyn Araluen for the poetry program. So tonight we'll be hearing readings from Sarah, Georgia and Ellen, and we'll follow that up with a discussion about connection, community and creativity in the digital era. So we'll just get straight stuck into it, I think. And I'd like to introduce our first reader for this evening, Georgia Kartas. So Georgia's trajectory started in Canberra, led her to Melbourne and landed her in Hobart. She is completing her honours degree in creative writing and performs poetry and reads tarot cards under her moniker St. George. She recently performed at the Underground Poetry event as part of Dark Mofo and is now collaborating with multidisciplinary artists to transpose some of her poems onto screens. Georgia also co-runs and edits online journal Red Magpie. Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks so much, Melody, and it's a real honour to be a part of this, so thank you. I'm reading two poems tonight. The first one was written as part of Toolkits, and I'll get stuck straight into it. It's called What We Built from Fire. Stewed in a volcano's belly, ignited by the moon's regret, birthed by an electrical storm. This voodoo and Venusian brightness, we two meet with searing skin, wood-fired bone, simmering sweat, detonating, vomiting, white-hot infatuation, heat-wave-crazed brains and glowing ember hearts. When the ashes fall, when the night horizon is furrowed and tinged hyena red, the colour of hard-spent passion. This is what it is to see a volcano take a siesta. What we have now is a mountain. Watch her now. Watch her roots as we tend to them with bare, blistered hands. We use the burnt horizon as a spirit level for a house we build out of mud and stone. Nobody said this would be easy, sculpting out of flame. We knew the price of using still hot lava as mortar as we scold one another with clumsy egos, fragile pasts. We build and build foundations of the house that reach far, far down, connect to the mountain's roots that grow deep and true, stretching out into the hinterlands. But we are not static. We are fire. With bittersweet, clasped, burning fingers, we pull away. Our paths diverge. We explore iridescent rivers and baritone plains. We burn our own beacons, but eventually we come back to the mountain, to those roots we excavated deep in the earth's core. And when we meet again, our meeting is a volcano. Vesuvius is active as though she never slept, and we are the fire-escaped mountain, both burning and grounded. We keep one another's beacons alight with steady, loving, tender hands, until once more we part ways, with umber kisses under the moon's wry grin. Awake, the volcano asleep, we two creatures tread parallel paths, wearing the mountain shadow as a heavy cloak that keeps our hearts warm when the night is cold and lonely. So that's my first poem. Thanks for listening. The second one is called The Shard Thief. It is a little bit about online dialogue, but kind of goes into an archetypal narrative. So, The Shard Thief. Our spell is broken. It shattered like a glass bowl. We scrambled for the pieces and we tried to make it whole. We refused to see the spell for what it truly was, the illusion of peace, a padded cell of cotton gauze. We're clumsy, broken fools who can't even fix ourselves. We ignore our damaged landscapes and we blame it on the spell. We lack the necessary language to articulate our rage, so we pilfer rotting carcasses of misdirected hate. The words we spill like blood come from intravenous feeds we willingly ingest through headlines scrolling on our screens. We think we own our voices, yet we speak with swindled throats. But there's a thief out there who's molding a prosthetic form of hope. The shard thief steals fragmented parts of misplaced hopes and broken hearts. She wants to plant them just like seeds that will grow into newborn dreams. She sucks on bleeding fingertips, the shards they cut her deep. Sprouts and endless droughts, survives on broken sleep. The shards still glow a little in her lacerated hand, and their warmth gives her a feeling that she tries to understand. She plants a shard in a beggar's heart, smuggles herself in a trader's cart, through winsome lands and lonesome plains, prays her work is not in vain. She hums a tune beneath her breath and keeps her shards close to her chest. She keeps her thoughts close to the bones of the ones who died in bomb-blitzed homes. Her swag is stained with oil and blood. Her hair is matted with rain and mud. She's running from the man who lies. He has black wooden pegs for eyes. His name is fear. His name is hate. He peddles a language that procreates and breeds divides between all sides. He subsidizes genocide. The world with his horde of metal spies, probing data in a tower that was built from hope's demise. Relentlessly, trawling land and sea and air. Our brave shard thief evades his gaze, but he's got eyes everywhere. So the shard thief runs, the shard thief flees. The shard thief cries when the shard thief sees the destruction left by the peg-eyed man. And still she tries to understand why no one could agree on how best to make repairs. We argued, blamed, yelled spiteful names, and gave into despair. We purchased false solutions that others paid for with their blood. We bought the myths our newsfeed dripped onto our passive shrugs. She wants to yell, "You break a spell," and wonder why it's unleashed hell. Darlings, it becomes a curse, 'cause empty hearts create a hearse. But she keeps on running. All hell's broke loose. The world's tied up with a slackened noose that'll soon be tugged, and then we're gone. And she knows we don't have very long. Shards into the breasts of budding embers in the oppressed, and she cannot linger to see them sprout, but she won't give in to seeds of doubt. Will not see them fruit, as she feels the heat of cold pursuit by the peg-eyed man and his dead-eyed troops, who are closing in and aim to shoot. She gathers up her swag and stumbles as she flees. She feels the bruises blooming as she rises from her knees, face to face with someone just like you and me, and she sees they are a person, not an abstract entity. They look just as scared as she now feels, and she realizes that they too can steal. There's a glowing shard in their right hand, and she finally starts to understand. She is not alone. It's a brief moment, the very briefest of spells. They run off into the night without so much as a farewell. Lights her heart so that she can carry on, casting spells from scattered pieces of dreams near dead and gone. So the shard thief runs, the shard thief flees. The shard thief finds a shard of glee. The peg-eyed man has the upper hand, but her shards still sprout in his wasteland. Thank you.
Yay, thank you, Georgia. Okay, so we might just, am I getting feedback on your computer? Oh no, it stopped. Great, thanks so much, Georgia, and great to hear you reading something that we workshopped in Toolkits as well. So on to our next reader for the evening, Ellen O'Brien. Ellen O'Brien is a writer, poet, and legal researcher of Gurungai descent. She lives and works on Gadigal and Wongal land and is interested in discussions about the meaning of home, community, memories, and the healing power of true care and love. Over to you, Ellen.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks, Georgia, for reading your poems. That was really beautiful. I don't know how many poems I'm going to read. I'm just going to go for it. But the first one I'm reading is actually the last poem that I worked on in Toolkits. And I guess it's about connection with people, with family in particular, through space and time, especially when maybe a physical presence isn't possible anymore. So it's called Pleiades. If I must go, I'll exit with sunlight. Like warmth off the stovetop, thrown from sequins, I be as bright as Beetlejuice and as celestially removed. Like an undertow, she constrains me. When I go, her tide will follow, will salt whip the softest spheres of me until they cling, 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 right round her mushroom melanocytes. And even though she don't know my face now, I'm not gone. I'll crystallize by Sarah's in a promise to protect. Chiron, saving strength for what comes next. But it don't matter where I end, she holds me to her. As time bulges, as horizons draw us down, I stick with my sisters through gravity, levity. No star swarm quite like it, our bubbled prison, distant with space. Thank you, that's the first one. The next one I'm going to read is a very new poem, so I haven't read it before, and hopefully it will go okay. It's called Our Mothers Deserve So Much More. When the fire burned, she stayed and fought and wrought a structure to keep her whole. 2 decades later, the ocean rose to meet her feet of stoic iron and bone. Lungs grief-scarred, she breathed across the blue of distance, and it got in me. I was pulled from her, and she was ripped away by his sea dream shelter into his swelterned home. When she was 9, she learned how to survive a rip, how not to struggle, how to succumb. And so she did. Like ashes whipped by sudden storms, she fell to shell-strewn tidal floors. How does a home become a shell? How do bodies twist and empty? Their husks remain strapped to our chests, our own lungs marked with wounds aplenty. Thanks. That's that one. This is an older poem that I wrote when I was living kind of away from a lot of people and mainly having connection with people through the internet. So yeah, I think my ideas of intimacy became quite different to what they were before. So there's a couple of poems which I might read a couple of them, which are all kind of from the same period of time. But this one is called Energy Exploitation. We get packed into back seats, armpits damp, windows wound down to relieve the pressure. Broken buckles force us into this juncture, and silently I glow, for any contact, however rigid, sustains me till morning. Brushed arms on a park bench kept me burning the whole year once. He entered it blinded by eternal light, yet I saw what I conjured and blamed it on the stars. I saw a heart coerced into skipping by turbulence and anxious whiskey, a head becoming a furnace filled with fragments ill-defined. Passing out above clouds, heavenly tension erupts sweaty sparks, inherently dangerous, like friendship stillborn in silence. Energy is converted into power, ripe for exploitation. A lump of coal is meaningless without a sharded core. But running rivers hold much more, the gift of intimacy unformed. I might just read two more. So this one is from the same period of time, and I've never read this before, and I actually just revisited it earlier this evening and changed it a little bit. So it feels quite vulnerable sharing this, but I think it's nice to reflect on the stuff that I was writing in this time and seeing how I relate to it now, maybe a couple of years later. But this is called Crushed 8 Tons. Picture all the things I do with you. I do them alone. But I imagine you with me as the stickiness spreads across my face, fingers, flesh and fancy fruits laid before me, devoured eagerly. I do these kind things for the both of us, without knowing what it is you desire. To go hiking, gasping, panting. It feels right to be breathless, watching the sunrise from the crest. I do these kind things for the both of us, without knowing what it is you desire. I see you in the colors on my face, morning mountains, cane fields at dusk. I see you in every monumental body of water. Those molten pools ripple every shore. And I see you without knowing what it is you desire. I imagine you with me, a placeholder for a positive feeling, a specter of a warmth-held heart. And in that spell, I consume you, without knowing what it is you desire. And the last poem I will read is probably the poem I've read the most. It's the first poem that I had published earlier this year, and it is called Birds. I dream of brothers broken, brain and bruised lungs blown and choking, battle battles left unspoken, beaten down into his core. I dream of brothers broken, baked black Billy spill in smoke, can barely breathe for all that joking, just one more bout she'll endure. I dream of brothers broken, bond was lifted, he's free bloke, and once was bright boy, oft outspoken, now eyes bore into the floor. I dream of sisters suffering, she's a soldier, sick and muttering, sacrificed to save small others, so sister seeds siblings once more. I dream of baby birds, their bells busted and deterred, from bouncing back to burrows heard, to be black holes inspiring awe. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks so much. I know it feels weird reading to a screen, but I promise you, people listening and clapping and very much enjoying all of your readings. So we'll move on to our last reader for the evening, Saro Uma. So Saro Uma is an Oromo Australian poet. Her work has featured in Moroni, Australian Poetry, demos and voice works. You can find her on Twitter at Saro Uma. Thank you, Saro.
Hey everyone, awesome job, Georgia and Ellen. That was really beautiful. I'm just going to read a few poems tonight. The first one I'm going to read, I wrote, I think just after I finished up with Toolkits actually. So I was in the 2016 cohort. And yeah, I was super inspired after doing the course and I wrote a whole bunch of work. So I'll start with this one, and it's called The Year I Stopped Watching Television. There's a black line under my fingernail. I've started praying again. I keep the same lover for 5 years. He watches films with guns and white men. He sits in an office chair, always something occupying his hands. I sit in the corner and ask myself how my day was. In a dream, I paint an impression of the Mona Lisa, smear black ink across her forehead. I've grown to muting the radio on the hour, count to 53 times before turning it on again. My lover says the people crying over their lost land can't feel the spirits no more. There's no line under my fingernail. I keep my prayers in a jar by the bed. I've left my lover of 5 years. He sits in an office chair, always something occupying his hands. How long have you been sleeping? In a dream, I enter a hotel in Alice Springs. A young girl with 5 hands smiles at me from the bed. I count to 53 times when the bodies start feeling my feet. My ex says that people crying over their lost land can't feel the spirits no more. But what if they are flying? And this next one, yeah, it's a lot. My father recently told me about how he made it to Australia as a refugee, and he had never really told me his full story. And yeah, at some point last year, he kind of filled in all the details. So I've kind of been going through this process of writing down parts of that history. And this one's called Reading Nikki Rosa for the First Time. Your father walked 77 hours towards an invisible line. A thin stretch of desert separates Ethiopia from neighbouring Djibouti. Movement across the border requires a signed blue slip or trafficker. He had joined a band of nomads and their camels. They threw stones to read the stars. They'd received a message from God to camp near a small oasis for a month and 3 days. They'd promised to get him across safe if he adhered to their customs, surviving off camel milk until the runes read the heavens in the right way. He speaks of seeing the ocean for the first time. The wide mouth of the sea hypnotized him as it does the African, cursing him to a life of looking out to foreign waters, the afterlife for all those without land. On YouTube, you find a video of a woman from Uganda blindfolded and taken to the coast of Madagascar. An American woman does the voiceover for the big reveal, films her reaction as the beanie is removed from over her eyes. You ask if he looked just as overcome at the coastline. He replies, Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. Her mother attends a women's group once a week. Volunteers run workshops on what she calls folding paper class, afternoon for refugee women. She lists the ethnicities present off her hand, giving each finger a name. She tells you of reoccurring drama between Batari and Ferdowsa, Yasmin and Fairuz, a room full of bodies bound only by a shared displacement. They call us global citizens, she says, as she places her orchid in the sink and floods it with tap water. When these women ask me where I am from, I reply I'm from God. She tips the plant, lets the excess liquid drip off into the sink, and pulls the orchid from the wide bowl of stainless steel and places it onto the windowsill in the kitchen. You ask if she would ever reveal to them where her body really belongs, and she replies, when I say God, I mean everything without light. I might just end with like a really, really old poem I wrote, which feels like I wrote it so long ago now. and it's just me being really angsty about love. And it's called What They Teach You About Love. Forget the rivers, reflections, the wild echinacea, and everything else you don't understand. Cleave yourself into positions that are unholy. Place your loneliness, discover martyrdom and compromise. Undress when you do not wish to, in hopes to salvage, to barter back a love lost in the bargain. Unlearn your passions, abandon dreams, the weight of desperation. Your connective tissue will begin to shrivel. You'll forget how to draft rosewater. They'll write articles about it. Friends will persuade you to take it. Somewhere along the way, it'll start to make sense. They'll teach you to take one lover at a time, about chances and how many are deserved, about expectations and how to feed them. They will lead you to every embankment to hunt for it, urge you to lock it down, preach what will kill it, what will heal it, to term every line until it solidifies, and tell you it has been rendered a kind of love.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was beautiful. And thank you, all of you. Thanks to all of our readers, Georgia, Ellen, and Sarah. It was great. It was really great. So I thought we could begin by talking specifically about toolkits and what you might have learnt about online and digital spaces and communities from toolkits. Helen, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think for me, like since I was like 10 years old or something, I've been involved in like online communities in some way. And I guess like over the last few years, most of the online communities I've been involved with have been like centered around activism or I guess like connection on more of a personal level, which is really important, especially like if you're a person who doesn't have those spaces in like IRL world. But I think this was the first time that I've been involved in an online space that has been about like writing as a craft or writing as like a process or creative practice. And that was really important for me. I've never done like a poetry class or course or haven't done English since year 12. So yeah, it was really like nice to have access to that through like an online space. To have an online space that was fostering focus on creative practice, which isn't obviously separated from like the political or the personal, but yeah, it was just nice to have that space and to also connect with people who are thinking about similar things in terms of creative practice outside of my physical space, because I think it can become very easy to be like tunnel visioned in your immediate surroundings or your immediate writing community. So it was really nice to connect with people from, I think, just mainly the East Coast, really, in Tasmania. But still, it was good to have those connections outside of Sydney, where I'm usually located. So, yeah.
And when you say that it was the first time that you had engaged with digital literary communities, is that because you were sort of engaging with the literary communities IRL? Or was that your sort of first time in, broaching literary communities? Was that in a digital space through Toolkits?
I think I guess I mean in the sense of like, I've always like, I wrote things alone. Like I've never really like talked to other people. Like I really only started sharing my work this year on like a publishing like scale or whatever, and reading things and stuff like that, which obviously there's been like IRL things, but everything's felt a little bit like disjointed in some ways. So yeah, I guess like in terms of having a space to share my thoughts and to work on something, and to think about like, what is a poem? How do we write poetry? I've never done that like with other people before, whether it's online or IRL. So, but I think, yeah, like, I don't know if I would have, I don't know, it's hard to say, like necessarily engaged with the IRL like there's something, yeah, the online space.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously very accessible, which I think was right for me in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And Sarah and Georgia, was that a similar experience for you, or?
Yeah, I think so. I don't connect with many other writers IRL, more kind of other disciplines. And I guess writing and reading usually feels like quite a solitary practice. So it was really interesting and quite encouraging, I guess, to share online space with other writers and readers. I found particular toolkits with the readings that we're assigned each week and discussing the poems and finding out other people's viewpoints who are also writing was really unique. In terms of other online writing communities, I'm usually a lot more of a lurker. So having that kind of opportunity to actually participate and interact much more actively in this facilitated forum was really, really rewarding.
I mean, that's interesting as well that you say that you were engaging with visual art communities in the real world. I wonder as well if there's something about the digital space. I mean, you know, obviously a lot of it is text-based, but that sort of promotes a kind of generative space, particularly for writers, if we're comparing it to other arts communities online.
Yeah, definitely. I guess also because I feel like I'm getting a bit more confident with connecting with other people who I know also write, with sharing work, and you can manipulate, edits and things so much more easily and actively now online through, Google Docs or whatever. That's, pretty amazing. So.
Yeah. And Sarah, your experience might have been a bit different as well, being from the 2016 cohort, whereas Georgia and Eleanor from this year. I guess you've got a little bit more perspective on it, in that you're able to reflect a little bit more long term on what you've gotten out of it.
Definitely, yeah. I think I've had similar experiences to both of you as well, in terms of I've always been involved in online spaces in some form since forever. And also for me, yeah, I was in real life, I was super involved in music scenes, and especially hip hop. There's a really great hip hop scene in Canberra. And I grew up there, and I just knew everyone there, and we just kick it. And I guess, I knew a lot of lyricists, but I didn't know any writers. So, and I didn't really see it as a thing to get together with other writers and talk craft. It wasn't a thing. I didn't even really know I was a writer. I was doing all sorts of other things for a long time. And so kind of happened, and I literally applied on the last day. And I remember I got in, I was like, what is happening? This is amazing. And I feel like the experience for me was really good in terms of confidence. And yeah, I guess it's been a year for me now. I feel like the main thing I've gotten from the experience, or gotten from working with other writers in a community online, is confidence in my own work, and having other people look at my work and be like, this is good, this is not as good, you can work on that, but in general, you've got a good voice and things are happening. And yeah, I think it's hard to, you need that reflection from someone else, right, to know that you're on the right track sometimes. Otherwise you're just in your own head, and we're all very heady people, I'm sure, we're writers. So yeah, I don't know, I think that's what I mainly got from it. And yeah, it's kind of just, yeah, it's really interesting being a year out from it. I just remember my feeling when I first started to now, and it's just completely different in how I see myself as a creative person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think, confidence is so important, not just in being able to send your work out there, but in terms of reaching out to other writers as well, be that, in online spaces or in the real world. Yeah, it's very important. And, it comes with working on those things. actually reaching out, and the more you do that, the more confident you get. So I wondered as well if, you had any advice for other writers, not specific to toolkits, but in terms of engaging in online community, online literary communities, and how you might be able to harness that.
Yeah. I feel like I'm the worst person to give advice about this because I really struggle with like online writing stuff. And also I wouldn't follow my own advice. Like I don't follow my own advice, so like the main sort of online space I use, I guess, is Twitter. I feel like there's a lot of writers on Twitter for some reason. I don't know. I guess it's a very short form communication, so you have to be maybe a bit witty or something to get your point across. But yeah, so I think it is a really good way. Like, I follow Sorrow, like, and we've never met before, but like we have that connection. So like connecting with other writers, even in like an initial way, and keeping up to date with people's work, sharing people's work, sharing your own work, like all of that is really great. But I think it can be really overwhelming, especially when there's like when shit hits the fan pretty much. And we'll talk about that later, I guess, in terms of Ellen Van Nieven's piece and the harassment that she got after it was used in the HSC. But yeah, I think like my advice to myself is to spend less time on the internet trying to connect with people, or just like messing around or reading shit basically, and some good stuff, and just like spend more time actually writing, or what I tweet, like write it down instead of tweeting it. And I have started doing that actually, which is nice because now I have all these random things to read back over. But yeah, I think it can be easy to get swept up in like the procrastination and the anxiety swirl of social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook. Like I know there's some writing Facebook groups, which are a really great source of information, but I think similarly it can become easy to get bogged down in that sometimes. So, but again, I don't take my own advice. So yeah.
I think what you're saying is really important, and it is important to be gentle with yourself. And I think, it's the digital space can be so overwhelming, and I think there are different levels of digital engagement as well. So like thinking about also, the online space as being, it can be something as basic as like an email, like if you, for example, if you see a writer give a reading that you really enjoyed, there seems to be like this real hesitancy for writers not to tell people when they like something. Write someone an email, and like that's an instant kind of form of making a connection, or tweet at them if they've got Twitter and you've got Twitter. It doesn't have to be like this full-on commitment to the online community. You can dip your toe in.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And like that was kind of the other thing I was going to say, is like not taking it too seriously, which I think that kind of to me falls into that, of just being like, it's not so serious. Like you can just say, hey, like I really enjoyed that. Like it's not that big a deal. Which isn't to say there aren't serious things that happen online and things that should be taken seriously. But in terms of like, I guess the facade of Twitter or online stuff overall, like just like not taking it so seriously is another advice to myself that I don't take, but hopefully one day will. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Georgia and Sarah, did you have anything to add to that particular point?
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know if it's advice, but something that's really helped me is just having one other poet friend read my work, and just having that one person that I can go to send work to them. And my friend who reads all my work and I read all her work, she doesn't live in the same city as me, so it is done all through like Facebook chat. And I think that kind of condensed form of communication and sharing of work is really healthy for me personally. Like I take breaks off Twitter and social media all the time because I like start losing my mind a little bit and just need to like back away, and there's a lot happening all the time. But for me, that kind of like small scale stuff is really important. And yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, the healthiest thing for me is just having one or two people I can trust with my work, and just sending it out and them sending it back. And be safe and be careful out there. Like the people I interact with online are careful with my identities and who I am, and I try to be careful with other people's as much as I can, and that reciprocal respect. Because yeah, like the stuff Ellen you're touching on, it's just been really too much at the moment. To be online and just to take in all this stuff, and it's yeah. So yeah, that's I guess the advice.
Yeah, I think on that note as well, I think it's important to remember that, you know, digital spaces aren't like some kind of digital utopia. And it's important as well that we really interrogate these spaces. So I guess thinking about that, maybe we could have a bit of a conversation about digital citizenship. So talking particularly to what Ellen was mentioning about the online abuse that was targeted at Ellen Van Nieuwen, as well as particularly Aboriginal women who defended her online, so Evelyn Araluen in particular. So what do you guys think about this notion of digital citizenship and how we interact with these things online?
Well, yeah, what you sort of said about, like, this is what I had kind of made a note of to say, was that the same structures and powers play out online as they do in real life. I think we all are aware of that. But it's almost, and I saw a few comments about this in the aftermath of what happened last week. But yeah, that it's almost bolstered by the anonymity of the internet, or the ability to be anonymous. But also, even when people aren't anonymous, there's almost like a feeling that you can get away with it or something, or that there's no consequences to saying something that you maybe wouldn't say in real life, like to the person's face. Maybe you would, maybe that's who you are. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think what Sarah was saying about like being like protective of yourself is like really important. And like, I just saw that we got a question that is it easier to form productive and meaningful creative relationships on particular platforms? And I was gonna say in response to that is like, I love Tumblr, but I think the reason I love Tumblr is because like I really only interact with people I already know, like either through a long history of interacting with them online or people I know in real life. And so it feels like a really safe space for me to like express myself or just like share like snippets of things I'm reading or whatever. Like it feels like a protected space. But yeah, I think what I saw with what happened, yeah, in the aftermath of the harassment last week was just a replica of what's been happening forever for Aboriginal women, for Black women, and it's just migrating online and almost making it easier for people to do it, to harass people, to threaten them. And yeah, I think that's a real issue. I don't know what the answer is. I don't really have any like golden ticket, but yeah, it concerns me and it makes me not want to be online and it makes me not want to say things. But there's also power in having that voice and having the ability to share and say things. And there's a lot of people, especially Black women, who do that and do it in the face of enormous threat. So I really respect them for doing that.
Yeah, Absolutely, and I think it's really important that we aren't just thinking about that. Sorry, I'm just getting a bit of feedback. Do you mind just muting your mic for a second, Ellen? Thank you. That we're not just thinking about that in relation to the people that are giving this harassment, but the way in which we support marginalised people as opposed to privileged people. So I'm thinking about that specifically as an example in relation to the Me Too movement and the Twitter boycott that followed Rose McGowan's ban. So if we look at that in comparison to the lack of respective support for marginalised women, like specifically the ESPN sports journalist Jamil Hill and the comedian Leslie Jones, both Black women who, you know, weren't afforded that same act of solidarity. So, you know, it's important that privileged bodies are stepping up and offering that sort of support.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in, and like, again, I don't really have answers to this, but while it is important to protect yourself and to take that time out in being, I guess, a digital citizen, questions of responsibility as well. I kind of, if we parallel it to seeing an act in real life of verbal abuse on the street or something like that, you know, this is obviously a very like moral and ethical question, contextual, but, you know, the degree to which you step in. And I don't really have the answers to this. I did feel really heartened by seeing so many writers respond in what happened to Ellen. But yeah, I think perhaps there is a degree of responsibility that we need to be more aware of if we're participating in other ways online as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I agree that it was really, you know, that was something good that came out of it was, you know, seeing the writing community really come together in spaces like Twitter to support Ellen and support Evelyn. Sarah, did you have anything that you wanted to add on the point of digital citizenship? Or?
Just only that, yeah, I think digital space, especially for, I think, marginalised peoples, Black women, it can be a really important space as well. And I say that because, I mean, I can't speak from everyone's position, but from my own personal understanding and my experience with digital space, it's a space where you can connect with your family that might be overseas that you don't get to talk to. It's a space where if you're not around people from your background or whatever, you know, you might find someone in another country that has a similar experience to you, or perhaps your voices have been silenced in some way, shape or form. So you have to find those connections online. And so it's important, I think. I don't have answers either, but it is really important that people that need to use these platforms to get access to family information, to feel proud of themselves, to see an image of a reflection of themselves on Twitter or whatever it is that they may need in that day, that these spaces are safe. And yeah, I don't have the answers. I just know that it's equally a difficult space, but also an important space for a lot of different marginalized people and a lot of people who, yeah, don't see maybe their voices or reflections in other forms of media. Yeah, so I mean, what happened was, like Ellen said, you know, the bigger power structures, they just trickled down into everything. And I mean, not surprised, absolutely devastated. And it's just, yeah, it's been a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a pretty full-on couple of weeks in social media across a range of different issues, I think. So it's a good time to be having this conversation for sure. And, you know, like, we don't need to have the answers, but I think it's really important that we're interrogating these things and talking about them. So Ellen just touched on it before, this question that's come through from Izzy on Twitter. Is it easier to form productive and meaningful creative relationships on particular platforms? So for example, email versus Facebook. I just wanted to ask Sarah and Georgia if you had anything that you wanted to add.
I think, like I sort of mentioned earlier, I'm a bit of a...
I like Tumblr too.
Tumblr's great. Sorry, you go, Sarah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I remember, Ellen, you mentioned Tumblr, and for me, it's probably Tumblr as well. I've had a Tumblr since I was 16, and I've had like 2 or 3 since then. It's just this like deep well of stuff happening. It's another world, and I geek out on Tumblr. I find it to be really safe and corny on some level and cathartic, and yeah. So I have a little private thing happening over there that I just go to and do my thing, and I see my own reflection a lot. I have people I know really well, and yeah, that's probably where I have my kind of interesting creative relationships, and then email if I'm trying to be professional, which I don't think I come off as professional at all, but I try. And then Facebook is like my actual family and friends.
Great. Georgia, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm going to change it a bit because I feel like this is a Tumblr confessional, and I'm totally
totally missed the Tumblr boat.
This is great. Same thing. It's the best. You can just, I don't know, I've managed to, educate myself about so much through all these like lonely souls posting up amazing like snippets of poetry or cool images or, really great controversial information that you wouldn't get through mainstream media. And it does feel a lot safer. Like Facebook is it feels so public and so exposed, even though I usually just use it for family and friends. But like the stuff that comes up and the trolling that comes up, I just don't think you see as much of that. Maybe I don't through what I'm following on Tumblr. But yeah, I guess creatively, I've found Tumblr to be a lot more fruitful. And yeah, definitely that well that you kind of just delve into and get this like inspiration and kind of, yeah, companionship through other people's weird headspaces. Yeah.
Yeah, right. This is really interesting for me because I don't know anything about Tumblr. So yeah, maybe I need to
like a bit older, like you like.
Okay, there's no need to point that out.
Because I feel like I got it when I was like 16 as well. So
yeah,
so
okay,
like yeah, it was like that like end of high school or like teen kind of thing, the emo teen. Well, for me anyway. Yeah.
I mean, it's great as well because it sounds like it's sort of anonymous as well as being kind of intimate and like forming actual one-on-one connections as well, which is sounds like an interesting sort of paradox. Does anyone else have any sort of final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess the other thing that I wanted to say that I've been thinking about after what happened last week with the trolls harassing Ellen, the use of Ellen's poem in the HSC, which, I mean, I don't really know Ellen, I don't really know the situation, but it seemed like it was used without her consent. And then also, I did see like Evelyn posted about not having her work or her words, that they're her intellectual property, basically, on Twitter. And I guess that's another concern of mine is sharing, like when you share things online, whether you have ownership of it, when you have ownership of it, and when you don't, and when people can take it and exploit it. And I think that's something that I mean, I know that people do talk about it in writing and creative communities, but maybe not so much in Australia. Like at least I haven't seen it. So if anyone has like good stuff like to recommend me, please do. But yeah, I just feel like that's something, especially marginalized writers, I think there's a tendency for our voices to be basically our words to be taken from us and then to be used often for like ulterior motives. So yeah, I think it would be cool to have more of a discussion about that. Maybe not here, but like online in the future.
Yeah, definitely. You should write an article about it. I'd love to read something on that.
I don't know if I have enough knowledge, but
I'm sure you can find out. Okay, well, I think we might wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Sarah, Georgia, and Ellen, and thank you, Digital Writers Festival, for having us. If you'd like to learn more about the Toolkits program, you can jump onto Express Media. We'll be opening applications again next year, but there's a bunch of great videos on there for you to watch of Toolkits live sessions from this year and the year before. Great. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Thank you.
See you.